have some kind of San Marcos Alcoholics International.
Well, maybe. Well, that's always there.
We're not going to go to war.
The governor's got one more year. He's got to take.
I hate when you hear the message and say,
Well, I don't mean to interrupt you.
Don't you hate that you do that if people call you and say,
Hey, Bill,
are you here? I'm waiting.
Oh, I know, I hate
Bill.
that one.
Sorry.
We didn't want that.
I'm sorry.
Okay, we're done.
Otherwise, we're going to get a review board.
It's Desmond's fault.
Okay, good morning. I want to remind you today is Friday the 13th.
You would have to say that.
Well, yeah, we're going to find good news in all of this. We've got a number of things we need to cover here. I can tell you that SB 805 will be covered on the ledge report in this meeting. But just a couple of things to maybe mention about, well, I'll do that. Okay. We have on our agenda approval of the minutes of the meeting.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion. This is the approval of the meetings of September 8th. There's no comments or corrections. Please cast your votes. And voting is closed. Those minutes are approved unanimously. Do you have any requests for public comment? No requests for public comment. So Victoria is going to give us the review of the draft board agendas for the 27th of October and the 3rd of November.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
So,
Happy Friday the 13th.
Good.
pleasure to be here. Today we'll be going over the October 27th board business meeting agenda. Your first three items are approval of the meeting minutes from the September 8th board policy meeting and the September 22nd board business meeting, followed by public comments and actions from policy advisory committees. Under the consent calendar, we have item number 4, which is the approval of the proposed solicitations and contracts. At this point, we have one solicitation coming before you on the commercial insurance brokerage service. Items number 5 and 6 are going to be pulled and brought to another meeting. Item number 7 is the proposed 2018 program budget amendment for the Smart Supervision Evaluation. This is encumbering some grant funding that we received from the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Items number 8 is the 2018 Board of Directors annual meeting calendar that we'll be seeking approval, followed by item number 9, which we're letting folks know that the final environmental impact report for the Buena Vista Lagoon Enhancement Plan is available for public comment. Items number 10 and 11 are your standard monthly meetings on reports and meetings attended on behalf of SANDAG, followed by the report summarizing delegated actions taken by the executive director. Under chair's reports, you have 2 items. Item number 12 is the appointment of the nominating committee for the board officers. This is for information. Followed by item number 13, which is the iCommute Diamond Awards Employers. This is the annual event to recognize employers who implement commuter programs. Under reports, we have item number 14, which is the SANDAG Go Bye Bike mini grant program, which is coming up to you from the Transportation Committee for an approve. Followed by item number 15, which is the Motors Aid Services Call Box Right Sizing and Implementation Plan. This is to approve the right sizing plan and make the necessary budgetary actions to implement. This is for approval. Followed by item number 16, which is the 2016-2017 Transnet Major Corridors Plan of Finance, which will be seeking an approval from the Board of Directors. Item number 17 is the 2008 Series C bond standby. Basically, Mizuho Bank currently serves as a liquidator provider. They're no longer offering these services in the market, and as such, we're asking to authorize Bank of America to be the subsidy liquidity provider. This would be an adopt. This is followed by item number 18, which would be an independent examination of the Measure A revenue estimates, where we'll be looking to provide a HANA Tools update, provide some closure to the senior staff, interviews by the board, and looking at the Transnet and Houston-Hennigan recommendations. Item number 19 is the 2019 San Diego Florida Regional Plan Draft Unconstrained Transportation Network and Proposed Revenue Constrained Network Scenarios. So we'll be bringing forward the unconstrained network and asking for feedback as we move this into the 2019 regional plan. We have 2 closed session items. One is in regard, item number 20 is in regard to the downtown stopover and multi-use facility. And last but not least is item number 21, the closed session on update for the 2050 RTP litigation. there any questions?
I just have a question on 19. The Transportation Committee asked for that to come back to them, back to us essentially, to take a look at that because we had several questions before we, I guess, moved that to the board. So I see that's already on the agenda.
It's coming back to Transportation Committee next Friday, and to the extent that you don't move forward on this, this will push out, but
Okay.
it is coming back.
Yeah, we have a meeting in between. All right,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you very much. All right. There's too many damn meetings. Okay.
That's why you're supposed to get something done in the first shot.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we did. We had a lot of questions.
Okay.
All right. The next item is item 3B, which is a review of the November 3rd draft board policy meeting. As a reminder, this day we have 4 meetings starting, and they're in a condensed time. So 8 o'clock executive committee will start. This meeting will start at 9 a.m. for the board, followed by an 11 a.m. transportation meeting and a 1:15 regional planning. So on the draft board agenda for November 3rd, we have your first item, which is public comments, communication, member comments, and then we have 3 reports. Item number 2 is the SANDAG Executive Director recruitment, where we'll be providing a recommendation on the firm to conduct the recruitment. Item number 3 is the SANDAG Plan of Excellence, where the Independent Examination Subcommittee will implement some of the plans from the Houston and Hennigan report. And in this item, we would also like to add an update on AB 805 and next steps. Followed by item number 4, which is the SANDAG Data Accuracy and Modeling Work Plan, where we'll be giving you an update on the plan of excellence and moving forward with these recommendations.
Okay, any questions? Move approval.
Second?
Okay. Have a motion for approval of both of these draft board agendas. We have a second. No further discussion. Discussion votes. Voting closed. Those agendas are approved unanimously. We'll move on now to item number 4, the SANDAG Independent Financial and Compliance Audit. Lisa will be giving us that report.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So as you may recall, at your last meeting, the SANDAG Independent Certified Public Accounting Auditor from Davis Farr presented an overview of the plan scope and the timing of the fiscal year 17 fiscal and compliance audit. The contract with the auditor is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th. So to have a new agreement in place prior to the onset of the next audit period, a request for proposal, or an RFP, is set to be issued in mid-November. So before I go into the scope and the process of the audit RFP, I would like to provide an overview of a financial audit, what it is and why we do it. So a financial audit is intended to provide reasonable assurance over the accuracy of our financial statements, which are prepared based on financial activity that occurs during the year. The audit focus is on whether the financial statements are presented in accordance with GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles. It provides a level of assurance that audited financial statements are free of material misstatements, and they can be used by lenders, investors, and the public. A financial audit is a look back at the prior year's activity, including items such as sampling our payments made, revenues received, or encumbrances. But the auditors also look at our internal controls to ensure that we have procedures in place to reduce fraud, amongst other procedures based on industry guidelines. So the reason for having this type of audit is that funding agencies and lending institutions require us as a grant recipient and as a borrower to have our financial statements audited, since external audit is a means of providing a reasonable basis for the users to place reliance on financial statements. But also, SANDAG is required to undergo an audit of its financial transactions in accordance with Public Utilities Code. So some of the auditor procedures in this scope are for compliance purposes. And one would be for the band pool program, which is federally funded and has a requirement to provide certain data on an annual basis. We also have the TDA and SDA audits, which include a financial requirement by the state but also includes some compliance information that we as the administrator of the funds would like, such as to ensure that the funds are being spent on approved projects and in accordance with state guidelines. The executive committee oversees the annual financial and compliance audit process, so we are asking for feedback on the proposed scope of work, which is your attachment 1. The audit is comprised of several components and produces multiple reports such as these, and they are provided in detail in your attachment 2, which is pages 24 and 25 of the PDF, or pages 9 and 10 of the hard copies. So this one here, this is the comprehensive annual financial report of the Kappa, and all of your jurisdictions have these. This encompasses all of SANDAG's financial transactions. But we also have separate standalone reports. We have it for the Commission, for ARGIS, SourcePoint, and the SR 125, based on different compliance reasons. So now if I could turn your attention to attachment 1, the proposed scope of work, specifically pages 19 and 20 of the PDF, or 4 and 5 of your hard copies. So the section's titled Primary Government Audit, Related Entity Audits, Single Audits, and TDA and STA Audits. These all provide, the language in the scope provides the framework for the financial and compliance audit simply by laying out the basic requirements. The other audit services section, this is located on page 21 of the PDF or page 6 of the hard copy, is where I'd like you to focus your feedback. This is where we expand the scope to include detail of items outside the standard financial audit that are still financial in nature, such as assisting SANDAG throughout the year on new requirements that affect how we report certain items. This section is where the executive committee or SANDAG management may add specific financial areas for the auditors on an annual basis. So once the scope is finalized and the RFP is issued, CPA firms will submit proposals, which will then be qualified by our contracts department. So, and if all goes as scheduled, which we're hoping, we would have an executed agreement in place sometime in March. The evaluation panel usually includes professional finance personnel from SANDAG member agencies, so your finance directors should be expecting an email inviting them to participate in this RFP. Our next steps include direction from the executive committee today regarding the proposed scope of work, specifically the other audited sections, the other audit services section, so we may finalize the RFP for issuance. And this concludes my report, and I would like to open it for discussion.
Are there questions for Lisa or any comments regarding the scope of work? Let me ask one, Lisa.
Yes.
If, given that we're going through some transition because of new legislation and whatever, would it be helpful to have in the scope of work some undesignated time as a kind of a safeguard in case there are some topics that come up in the next few months that could be related to our implementation of, let's say, 805 or other things that the financial auditor could help us with?
Absolutely. One of the steps that we take while we are putting together the proposed scope is we look at RFPs that are currently out there in the field, not just in San Diego, but in the state, and then in the U.S. as a whole, to see what the standard language is that is being used to make sure that we're up to par. And one that I did see just recently was adding a set number of hours within the scope that says, you know, we're going to have this set aside every year so that the capacity, the dollar value of the contract will include enough time for something specific that may be brought forward in the future.
Well, at least for discussion, I would encourage us maybe to add that to the scope of work so that we have a little bit more flexibility. Because otherwise we might have to go back and redo the contract, which takes time and effort and all that kind of stuff. What would be a recommended amount?
60 to 100 hours, somewhere in there, I think would be, and we can look into that a little bit further, and then put something in there based on, you know, what we're finding out in the field.
Other comments? Okay. Could I have a motion of approval of this scope?
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, this is just for
Okay.
We'll
discussion.
take the
Yeah.
feedback in terms of additional time.
Never mind.
Thank
Never
you.
mind. Thank you, Lisa.
And if any of you have suggestions, get those to you, Lisa.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, we move on now to item number 5, a legislative status report. And Victoria and Robin and that's it. Let me, before you get started, we've been busy. And you know, some of you were on the trip to Washington. We had a very full agenda, and I think there really is some good news to report. We had meetings with the State Department, first of all, to make sure that our presidential permit for the Otay Mesa, the new border crossing is going to continue to be in effect, and we're going to meet whatever deadlines are needed under that. We had a face-to-face meeting with Senator Feinstein. We had to politely remind her that they've shorted us over $50 million now on the mid-coastline. And just as a reminder, when we started that, if you go back to our original discussions with them, they were going to provide $125 million a year so that we would get, in 6 years, we would get to the $900 million that the feds were going to contribute. They then, with the first payment, said, okay, they were going to draw this out a little longer, 9 years, $100 million a year. And that was okay, that worked for us. It didn't work for us as the payment this year, $50 million, which would then draw this out over a far longer period of time, costing us a lot more in interest, and throwing off any projections we had for this. We had a good meeting with her. We since detailed in a letter and suggested to her that, hey, there's a problem here. And she didn't really understand how it came about, but in all her good intentions, she was largely the person responsible in appropriations for reducing this. And we let her know that the original amount we got was $100 million. She was thinking the original amount we got was $50 million. We're following up with letters, and we've got a commitment from some of our congressional delegation, including Scott Peters, that he would personally go over and meet with her and see if we could get this restored at the $100 million level that it should be. So it's all approved. Is all they have to do is appropriate. We met with the Mexican ambassador, Gutierrez, and the first thing, and overwhelming, that I wanted to thank him. He has been enormously helpful on a new border crossing. And I can't say enough good about him. He got the Mexican government. He kickstarted this, and it was his intervention that really has made a significant difference in things happening on their side of the border. I was embarrassed that some of our members spoke to him in a less than proper way, I felt, but sometimes when you have things that are so important to you, you tend to get a little disrespectful, and that was the case. But our meeting and my conversation with him was very, very positive. We also got a report from the Department of Commerce on NAFTA conversations and the negotiations that have gone on. And you almost came away feeling a little bit more positive than what you sort of read in the newspapers. At least I did. Maybe I'm just too optimistic. But, I think that will get resolved in a way it's going to work for everybody. In any event, it was generally it was time well spent, and we had very full agendas to the point where I'm driving me nuts on a couple of days. We stopped for lunch at about 3:30. And just kept going until we made sure we cleared up everything. So with that, made sure we cleared up everything.
We also had, as part of this chamber trip, we split into two groups. So Kim and I went off and advocated for other projects at the same time. We met with the Department of Transportation to thank them for the autonomous vehicle and promoted that whole potential project that we have down in the South Bay, which is going to be very good. We met with congressional leaders and worked on the idea of the Mid-Coast and the funding, as the chair mentioned, and also the whole North Coast corridor and the border were constantly being presented to these people. So you got to keep working these folks to the idea that it keeps in the top of their mind that we've got these really good projects going on and we need support. So we took time, we went in different directions, but it was time well spent. So that's the report then.
Now, two time, I wouldn't say it's two time. I'd come up with a different term.
Well, we
covered twice as much by splitting up into two groups. I should mention, since the Vice Chair mentioned autonomous vehicles, I had a nice conversation with Mayor Gonzalez yesterday. When we were in Atlanta, I spent some time courting a major autonomous vehicle company. I had met previously about 2 months ago with their North American sort of CEO, but the international guy was here from France, and the company was Transdev, and they were doing cars, shuttles, and buses, and they want to get testing those. They narrowed it down to several different cities now. I should say communities, not cities. And I can tell you, I think after we finished, we're very high on my list, and we're going to pursue that. And we've had a conversation. Hopefully we'll have some of the important people there down before too long. Or we'll go where they are. They did if I could come to Paris for a conference, but I found out I can't do it.
I'll take your place.
You got to pay your own way, though. In any event, what's important here, I think we're making progress on a number of fronts. I'm really excited about that one because of potential for utilizing the city of Chula Vista in the way that they agreed to do it, and using our Highway 15 lanes. We can have some really good things going here at some point next year. So again, we were covering a lot of ground. Council President Cole, we were together at a number of meetings. We learned an awful lot about electric buses, maybe more than we should. But so I think we're really well armed to do the things that need to be done in a practical way. So
You want a pilot program here soon.
Pardon?
You want a pilot
A pilot.
program here
Yeah.
soon, hopefully.
We're gonna make something happen. So we're gonna start learning
More.
through experience, direct experience, just like as we did when we started with the CNG buses. We tried to find out how mechanics got to be able to deal with it. We had a whole lot of issues, and we'll be embarking on something this year for sure. And with that, now the important stuff. With that.
No, so I'll be providing a brief update on autonomous vehicle legislation that's been moving through the House and the Senate. Notably, September 6th, the House passed H.R. 3388, which is called the Safe Drive Act. The bill lays out the basic framework for autonomous vehicle regulation, signaling that lawmakers are finally ready to address self-driving cars and what they mean for our future. The bill officially designates the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, to regulate vehicle design, construction, and performance. In addition, the bill outlines implementation testing guidelines for the U.S. DOT. The agency has 24 months to stand up rules regarding safety, 18 months to stand up a rulemaking for privacy, and has a year to figure out self-driving cars' performance standards. Finally, the legislation also increases the number of exemptions that will be offered to car manufacturers to test on the roads, which means that ultimately, incrementally, you're going to see more cars testing on roads without some of the basic features such as steering wheel. On the Senate side, the legislation is still in committee. On October 3rd, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee gave the green light to allow states to move forward with autonomous vehicle testing, but invoking federal preemption. The bill bars states from imposing regulatory blocks. However, it does allow states to implement legislation regarding licensing, liability, insurance, and safety inspections, but not performance standards. Neither the House or the Senate would speed up approval for self-driving technology for commercial vehicles or vehicles over 10,000 pounds, which is a step that's been pushed by the trucking organizations but has been pushed back on vigorously by the unions who are worried about safety and employment concerns. As such, legislators on both sides have reluctantly not added this component to the legislation. So the Senate proposal now goes before the full Senate for consideration. It is anticipated that it will move off the floor potentially by the end of the year, where then it will go to conference where the two bills can reconcile and differences can be worked out. So it is anticipated that Congress will probably get out in front of the administration and set up some frameworks to allow states essentially to start testing, offering the exemptions, and really moving forward to real-world adaptation of the technology. This concludes my report, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Any questions?
All right, at the state level, the legislature is officially in recess, and that means the governor has until Sunday to sign or veto any remaining bills on his desk. As Karen mentioned, on Wednesday, the governor did sign into law AB 805, which will take effect on January 1st of 2018. So in the coming months, we will be bringing some updates to the board to talk about next steps as far as it relates to implementation. As Victoria mentioned, on November 3rd, that's our plan to bring the initial readout to let everyone know all of the changes that were included in AB 805 and what it could mean for SANDAG, and start the conversation about how we move forward in advance of the implementation date on January 1st. In addition, the governor also took action on cap and trade. As you may have heard, the most recent auctions showed a tremendous improvement over previous results, with about $642 million coming in for revenues for the state. And in the final weeks of the legislative session, the legislature was able to finally come to an agreement on an FY17-18 expenditure plan. So under that expenditure plan, there's about $1.5 billion available for cap and trade programs statewide. Much of the spending is slated for hybrid and zero-emission vehicle programs, fire prevention and forest health, and urban greening type programs. But this is also on top of the $900 million that will be available in continuous appropriations under the cap and trade program. You may recall 40% of cap and trade dollars automatically go to some of the certain programs, including high-speed rail, the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, and the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program. And SANDAG thankfully has been successful in competing in the first two rounds of some of these programs, getting funding for the South Bay Rapid, as well as several of our projects on the Low Sand Rail Corridor. On another funding note, SB1 continues to move forward. The local streets and roads program, that's the one that provides formula funds to all of the local jurisdictions, is already up and running, with apportionment set to be released as soon as January of 2018. And the CTC is set to adopt the next set of guidelines for 3 of the SB1 programs next week at its meeting. So we'll continue to follow those. Also mentioned in your report are a couple of repeal efforts that are underway. We talked about these at our previous meetings. The first initiative will repeal most of SB1, particularly the gas and diesel tax increases. That one has been filed with the AG's office, has been cleared for circulation, and is now in its signature gathering phase. It has until January to reach the threshold of signatures that are required. The second initiative was more recently filed. This one would require that any new gas and diesel tax increases, as well as any road user charge, would have to go to a statewide vote. And it's retroactive, meaning SB1 would have to go to you would have to run another bill and then take it to a statewide vote for those taxes to take effect. And that one is currently with the AG's office, waiting to get its official title and summary, and at that point it will be cleared to start collecting signatures for that one to qualify for the November ballot. So we're planning to bring a very comprehensive update on SB1, including the repeal efforts, to the Transportation Committee next month, and then to the board after that, to start talking about how SANDAG can participate, making sure all of our jurisdictions know about the opportunities that are available under all of these new funding programs. And then finally, the governor and the legislature also were successful in reaching agreement on a major affordable housing package at the end of the session. And so we've invited our colleague Seth Litton here to join us today. If you don't know him already, he is our new housing guru. And you probably will become very familiar with him because he will be leading our RENA efforts here at Sandeg over the next couple of years. He's going to provide us with an update on the housing package.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Robin. On September 29th, Governor Jerry Brown signed a suite of bills addressing the statewide housing crisis. These bills were intended to cut the red tape and encourage more affordable housing construction through funding programs, incentives, and streamlined reviews. We provided a housing package summary in your materials with a brief summary of all 15 bills the governor signed, each categorized by their impact. San Diego Forward, the regional plan, calls for the region to ensure the construction and availability of a variety of types of housing for residents of all income levels and abilities. So I wanted to highlight several of the bills that have an impact on Sandeg's goals and also local government. SB 2 will raise approximately $250 million annually to fund local and state housing programs. A portion of the funds will be available for local governments to update planning documents and zoning ordinances to streamline housing production, and also can fund new environmental analyses to eliminate the need for project-specific review. Additionally, the funds will be used for affordable housing construction and homelessness prevention programs. SB 3 places $4 billion housing bond on the ballot in 2018. This bond would be used to fund existing housing programs as well as infill infrastructure financing, affordable housing matching grant programs, and assistance for veterans. These new funding sources can be used to meet the needs of a diverse growing population in the region. SB 35 allows a developer to submit an application for a development that is subject to a streamlined ministerial approval process if the project is a multifamily development in an existing urban area and meets several other requirements. Several other bills also affected the housing element law, including AB 1397, which amends the location and availability requirements for housing units that are required to be identified in the element. AB 897 amends the information required in the annual housing element progress report and requires additional information in the housing element on the analysis of government strict constraints on housing construction. And finally, a bill that is still on the governor's desk and has not yet been signed is AB 1637, which would actually allow the San Diego Housing Commission to implement a pilot program to develop and finance middle-income housing, which is available for folks who don't necessarily qualify for lower-income housing, but are still struggling to afford a median-priced home in the region. All of these bills tie to the regional plan strategies for housing. The plan calls for increased funding opportunities, new incentives for housing construction, and the accommodation of housing for all levels of income. Finding ways to fund and construct affordable housing continues to be difficult, and hopefully these bills will help accomplish the plan's goals. Again, this is also a good time to remind the committee that of the upcoming regional housing needs assessment process, which will take place in 2018 as part of the update to the regional plan. Since many of these bills will require state agencies to develop implementation guidance, we plan on continuing to track the bills and ensure that they're considered in the upcoming review process. So, thank you very much.
Thank you to our new guru. And I wanted to acknowledge Deanna Spades here. Tony Atkins worked really hard on SB2. And we barely had some support to the table for her, but that's really going to be helpful. We're going to hear later on a report that will emphasize how important housing is to us. And the shortfall is enormous. It's not small. Rick Gentry the other day when I was making comments, he said we have about 10,000 units a year falling short. He kept going. No, higher. And I kept going higher, but never getting to put it in more than double that. We'll talk about that at a further time, but it's actions such as these that are going to help, should help us. And I'm glad to hear about the sort of the affordable working people stuff that's really needed. We need it. Housing period. The more housing, the better, because it'll work. But Seth, welcome. Thank you. Questions? Let me start. Councilwoman Zapp.
Thank you. Do you know some of the details in some of these?
Most of them, yeah.
So SB2, for example, the $75 per page fee, up to 3 pages. Is there an, is that on everybody? Like, these are just transactions. It says not new home sales. So let's say that somebody who is low income is trying to refi their place and get a better interest rate. And so they're filling out transaction documents. Is this something that would apply to them?
And that wasn't my reading of it, I think.
Yes, yes.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it would.
Yes.
That would be great.
Refinances are a typical Kappa fee. So there's a whole list that the state regulators will put together and give to the county assessors, the county reporters, and as documents are filed and they pay. Most of them are connected to bank documents.
Okay. So is there an exemption? I've been saying for a long time that I thought that there should be, it's passed already, an exemption for us at a certain threshold so that low-income people who are trying to stay in their homes and refinance aren't having to pay money for other people to be housed. So is there any exemption, or like it's on a $200,000, $300,000 home, condo?
And the only exemption is that there's a limit of 3 charges per transaction.
Right, so, but is there an exemption for
Not
homes
for
under,
income.
so low-income people, no matter what income level, if they're struggling to stay in their home, end up having to pay as well? Okay.
Yes.
All right, which one is this? Oh, SB, what's that?
Said I've been down that road. I tried that with water hookups a number of years ago.
Yeah, well, I just don't, whatever, I just don't think people who are struggling to stay in their home, who don't make a lot of money, should pay for other people to have.
I agree with you. And share your frustration.
Yeah. Number 35, SB 35. So this is for affordable housing. So we're talking about the affordable housing as in subsidized, not workforce affordable, right?
Both.
So, but affordable usually means the subsidized, where workforce is usually.
It has to do with jurisdictions that don't have a current housing plan that's gone through and been reported to the state.
So it looks to me like trying to build affordable housing, construction workers have to use union and pay prevailing wage, which drives up the cost about 20–25%. So we're saying that all these affordable housing has to pay prevailing wage, and we use unions.
Yes, that's not Senator Acton's bill, but she did support it.
Look, right, that's right. It's not. So.
The portion of the bill, yes.
So the portion of the bill is affordable housing has to pay union prevailing wage.
That's how I read it, yeah.
All right.
Let me, that particular bill is for, as jurisdictions, you're supposed to adopt your housing elements. For the cities that don't have approved or court approved or the city council approved housing element, what SB 35 provides is a process for developers in certain urban areas who are willing to pay prevailing wage for their projects. A streamlined process where it doesn't require city council approval. It's basically a ministerial permit.
For the city of San Diego, for example, you have an adopted housing element. Wouldn't kick in.
I was just looking at.
And also would need to be requested by the developer. Receive the streamlined review.
Okay.
All right, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, my questions are on the Wiener bill also, the SB 35. Now, as I'm reading it here, and as I've read it other words, it doesn't just doesn't say if you have a housing element approved, but also if you fail to meet the state mandated housing production goals, which is different than having a housing element. And so part of my problem is, and is there criteria that still has to be established on this that's outside? That's what I'm thinking. I think there's where the devil's going to be in the details, because the problem, as I see it, is that, like in the case of National City, what we did with our arena numbers, we took each area's already their approved plans, what they had in their planning, and we just tagged those numbers in. In the case of National City, since we said we were going to allow for a lot more development in our downtown, where other cities wouldn't allow development in their downtown. Our RENA numbers, even though we have the highest percentage of affordable housing already in the county of any city, our numbers went up 1,500%, our RENA numbers. And that was to accommodate other cities that either didn't allow for any housing production.
We thank you, Mayor, for
Yeah,
that.
I know it. So the question now comes in, since if we can't meet that extravagant number, and some other community only put in 20 houses that they have to build, so they met their number, does the low-income communities end up being the ones who end up suffering? And that's the, I think this criteria and thresholds, I think, is what is going to have to be important here, and the details worked out in that, because let's just be honest, developers, if they look to have, shall we say, to be able to buy property in, I'm going to say Rancho Bernardo, to put in affordable housing, as opposed to in Council President Myrtle Cole's district, where do you think they're going to buy property to build affordable housing? Because they get it a lot cheaper in your district than they can in Rancho Bernardo. So therefore, we concentrate all the low-income housing into just certain pockets. That's what we want to avoid. So the criteria is something I think we need to keep a very close look at, so that that does not happen.
I can assure you that everybody will be looking closely as those regulations move forward. But the intent is for jurisdictions that are working at meeting their RENA goals. They're not, the goal is not to punish them. If you're working towards it, then you're being successful under this model.
And I'll also add, I think when we look at the RENA process next year, that is going to be one of our goals, is ensuring, and it's one of the state mandated goals for the RENA process, is to ensure that the affordable housing is located throughout the region. So as we see implementation for how this bill goes, we can adjust accordingly.
Which means RENA numbers, when we look at that process next year, is going to be a lot more contentious than it was last time. Okay.
It was pretty contentious last time.
Not nearly what this is going to be, I think.
Yeah.
Just for the record, Mayor Morrison, Carlsbad doubled their affordable housing units from 2 to 4 now, so they're doing a good job as well. I have a question about the gas tax. We have committed $863 million, I think, next year, the next year funding under the unconstrained project in Sandag, what we saw in the financial projection, and also local cities, getting millions of dollars. So when you say repeal that gas tax retroactively, does that mean we have to return the $863 million if it's repealed?
Well, the $863 million is not entirely SB1, correct? So whatever portion of that 863 that is SB1, that's an outstanding question. Our understanding is that the CTC intends to fulfill any commitments that are made. So any awards that are made prior to any repeal that may take effect should be guaranteed. It just may take longer to get those funds.
So this is a question mark, and also, like this community is getting $3.5 million that we put in our budget as well. So local jurisdictions and Sandag, just to make sure this money that we're getting, we don't spend it before it's for sure in our budget. The second question is about AB 805. I'm going to get personal with this, and I'm going to get emotional, because I've never seen in my 30 years in this country more aggression on our constitutional rights than AB 805. I thought California Voting Rights Act is the worst, but AB 805 is not. It is now, in my opinion, the worst. It disenfranchises 2 million people in San Diego. The biggest loser in this is the county with over 1 million, and the rest are the small cities, the 15 cities. My question is, for the leadership of Sandag, you need the 2 cities and Chula Vista. They need 2 more votes from 2 other jurisdictions to determine the chair of Sandag. Is that right?
So under AB 805, how the election for chair and vice chair would work is there's a requirement now that the chair and vice chair be from separate subregions. There's a requirement that that election be based purely on a weighted vote basis, and that it will be for 2-year terms versus the current annual term.
So it is correct that the city, Chula Vista and the city of San Diego need 2 more votes to determine the leadership, and need 1 more vote to set policy.
Under the weighted vote system, any combination of jurisdictions that would surpass 50% would be able to elect
So,
chair
so,
and vice
so
chair.
it is. So my statement about 2 million people have been disfranchised is absolutely correct. Here's the press release of Assemblywoman Gonzalez Fletcher. This is a good day for the silent majority in our region who have been ignored and paid over for too long. This is an offensive comment. This is in the press release. She's saying that us in Sandag, and one of those, who represent 155,000 people, we have been paving over the minority group and the silent majority, and the majority and the minority in this thing. And she says this is not the end, this is just the beginning of that. You know, my question is, what options do we have as Sandag to move forward to repeal that bad legislation, either through a petition to the voters or through the legal court process?
We're going to be discussing that, and to the extent there might be options, and we were talking about something on the ballot. I think many of us are frustrated with this approach to our government. I just asked, stay calm and we'll work our way
It's
through
hard,
this.
Ron, it's very hard.
It's hard for a lot of people. By the way, the county is less than, it's about 550,000 in the unincorporated population, not over.
Okay.
Let me, I got a question by Bozeman.
Oh, sorry. I share your sentiments, Sam. I had a question, I guess, for either Seth or Deanna on SB2. And you're right up here in the attachment 3. It says creates the $75 document fee. It says in the staff report here that it excludes home sales, but from Laura's questions, it didn't sound like it excluded home sales. It does.
Yes, it totally excludes home sales.
Home sales, but not refinancing.
But not refinancing.
Okay. So totally exclude just the sale of homes, but not refinancing. Okay.
Right.
All right. I just wanted to make that clear. And then on SB 35, the state mandated housing goals or numbers that we get. I guess I know there's RENA. Is this another layer of production housing goals, or is RENA the goals that we're supposed to achieve here? RENA's it. RENA's it. Okay. I didn't know if there was another layer on top of RENA or not for that. Okay.
Another SB 35 question. Does that include all categories of RENA then? Not just low and low income, but also moderate and above moderate?
I would assume it would mean if you've got targets for each of those income levels, that all 4 of those targets would be considered.
We'll take a deeper dive into this.
I have already sent an message to my city manager to ask it, because it grows a little, I suppose, a little unique, because our biggest problem is figuring out where to put all those above moderate estate homes in Lemon Grove. And we've already met our low and low income, because that's our working class folks, but that's been my problem for 15 years, is where to put all those estate homes.
Right on the border of Spring Valley?
Nothing left,
Okay. Deanna, thank you.
You have to build high-rise, portable,
I'm sorry.
high-rise.
Council President Cole.
This is a complex issue, I'm sure, but let me start with affordable housing. That's one of the reasons why I went up to Washington to advocate for affordable housing as well as homelessness, and try and get some funding, and that's what Rick Gentry was up there for, and maybe to no avail, but at least they know what Scott Peters and Susan Davis and Daryl Isaac, they know what we're advocating for. And as far as affordable housing, when I first became council president, I had 2 special meetings. One was on homelessness. The second one was on affordable housing, because we've been putting money towards services, but not actually building houses and building affordable housing and building permanent housing for our homelessness. And so that's what we want to do. And I'm hoping that SB2, SB3 will help us do these things, because we need to house our homeless. I was in New York and talking with the speaker, and they have the highest population of homelessness. We were walking around the city, and I said, and I didn't see any homeless people on the street, and I said, Speaker, where's your homeless people? And she says, we house them. So that's what we need, a lot of these funds for housing on. So I'm hoping that SB2, SB3 will do that. I'm proud to say I have 5 affordable housing projects in my district that just happened within the past 2 years because people in my district were leaving because they could not afford to live, even in the full council district. So I was so pleased to make sure that we have our share of affordable housing, and it's quality affordable housing. We're just not going to take anything. It's going to be quality, and I don't mind taking even more. We're going to have another project that hopefully will be coming online next year, and it's going to be more market rate as well, affordable market rate, as well as affordable housing. So I'm excited about that. I'll take my fair share because I want the people in my district to be able to live and stay in the 4th Council District and prosper. So I'm looking forward to the funds. And I was even talking to Todd Gloria about this in Benhueso, and they support this, the SB2 and SB3, they were talking about this. So I know that it might maybe put strain on some people, but I hope not. I mean, I'm hoping not, but again, they're building affordable housing in my district because of the funds that we're getting, and I hope that we can get more funds from the federal government and not just our state. But those are my comments, and as far as the SB or AB 805, Mayor Faulkner will be at the board meeting this morning, and I'm sure he'll make some comments about that.
I know he will. Yes.
Yes, he will.
Yes,
yes.
I know that.
Thank you.
Myrtle, first of all, I want to just tell you your attitude is one that I wish was pervasive through our whole community. Every community seems to come up with an excuse of why they can't do it, okay? You got too much, we don't have enough, we're too expensive, we're not expensive enough, it's not a good project, it violates the Grant Act or something. We've got to build housing.
Right.
I grew up in public housing, and was largely for working class families. 3,500 units were planned and built in 9 months. It was called Linda Vista. We couldn't build 3,500 units on a single project if our lives depended on it. Okay?
We didn't.
And we need to change the dynamic, and we need to stop coming up with our individual reasons for why we can't do things. You know, it's too expensive, it's not expensive enough, it's just, I mean, it's, listen to the, I'd like to publish something with all the excuses for not building housing. And you got families out there, that's why our homeless is affected. Okay, we got people who are falling off the cliff. And we're trying to do something about that, but you're not gonna have an impact unless you really start building housing. If housing is in short supply, there's no way you can, there's no way that homeless is going to go away or even be reduced. Okay? There's no question of that in my mind. So, if you have excuses, look in the mirror.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up question on the money. The discussion made me think of this. Since I have zero faith whatsoever that Sacramento will follow through with promises, and especially with the money raised and spent, given their poor performance history, the $75 per page, when it's collected, does each jurisdiction get to keep the money that is generated in their city? Or does this go into a big old pot in Sacramento? And
well, I know the answer to that
they
without
put it out
asking
in
you.
grants, go begging back for it, like they.
We'll try to get you your share, Lori, okay?
No, I'm serious. I mean, is this like a big old fund and then we have to like beg for our money back or what?
Deanna, we should have just give you a permanent chair with a sign up here.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
This is what they did.
I need to rush ahead now. We got another
complete
meeting.
bait and switch on Prop 47, on redevelopment.
Okay, Lori, stop for air. Deanna.
There's a formula for how money comes back to local governments. And the first year, it's handled differently than it is all the other years because of the urgent need to do something to deal with homelessness and supportive housing and So 70% of the money goes to local governments in the first year, and 30% goes to Housing and Community Development Department that will be granting funds for projects that are ready to go. So, but one of the big things is that cities in the county can apply to update their community plans. We all know that there are backlogs on community plans, and sometimes that's what stops jurisdictions from being able to move forward quickly. And so there is funding set aside, and there is an allocation system. I will tell you that there were long debates about how to make sure that every part of the state gets money, and that it comes back to local governments. That's the goal of this. It's not that it sits in some pot in Sacramento that you have to beg for. It's that the money is going to be given to you, but you have to submit paperwork showing how you're going to spend it. And you've already got a lot of those plans. I mean, our region here is very progressive in terms of looking forward and doing those kind of long-range plans.
So let me be clear, so if we generate the city of San Diego
It does not
transactions-
stay within the jurisdiction that generates it. There's an allocation system, and it's very complex, and that paperwork will be coming in.
And so people have to manage that complexity, and so we have a whole department doing that.
No, actually, this doesn't require hiring new people in Sacramento.
So who's going to be
Lori,
deciding? I'm
I'm gonna
sorry,
interrupt
it's
you
just
here.
like, it's a lot of money.
Your time's
and-
up. Ron, quickly, and then Supervisor Jacob, we got another meeting we got to get
Okay,
into.
just want to say real quick, yeah. I think we all have reasons as far as on the housing situation, and each community does have different ones. I know in ours, just opened up another 100 units, we're building another 100 units, all affordable. But then there are groups like EHC that demand that every housing project in our city be affordable, quote unquote, subsidized, which is unrealistic, because we can't get businesses to come in because they look at the economic scale and they won't bring businesses in, so you can't provide the services to the people. So there's got to be a balance in every community on that one. The one last point I'll bring up, I know like New York, you don't see a whole lot of homeless, you don't see them in New Orleans either, because they don't allow their homeless to put tents on the sidewalks, so they all go to East Village. So we can take care of our homeless, the problem is, can we take care of the entire United States homeless?
Yeah.
That becomes a question too.
Just as a reminder, we're going into
We're gonna
homelessness.
have a discussion on this, and we'll educate. It's not about the tents.
Just very quickly, I wonder if it would make some sense, and maybe Deanna, you could give us some guidance on this, as a region, Sandag to put in one application for all the entities on this issue, this pot of money. We did that for transportation dollars a few years ago with the feds. We got together as a region, everybody put in their recommendations.
And environmental dollars too.
Supervisor, that would have been a good idea yesterday before AB 805 passed, but I think on a way to vote, I'd be very reluctant to create one fund.
Well, maybe
But
it's worth a
we'll-
try.
Well,
Just thought.
okay. Last comment, that's it. Any public comment? No. Upcoming meetings, no. Friday, November 3rd is our next scheduled meeting at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. Put that on your calendars, please. Thank you for being here today. We get started on our next meeting.